All Creatures, Great and Small, by James Herriot. Let me paint you a picture. It's the dead of night, somewhere deep in the English countryside, and a blizzard is absolutely howling outside. There's this young guy, barely in his 20s, lying face down on the disgusting cobbled floor of a barn. He's stripped to the waist, snow whipping through the open doorway and melting on his bare, sweating back. His entire arm is buried inside a cow, desperately trying to deliver a calf that just won't come out. He's completely exhausted, freezing cold, and honestly starting to lose it a little. And here's the thing that makes it even worse. Perched comfortably on a bale of straw, puffing away on his pipe like he's watching the evening news, is this old farmer everyone calls Uncle and Uncle. Well, Uncle has opinions about everything. "You know," the old man says, his eyes practically twinkling with mischief, "my vet, Mr. Broomfield, now he's absolutely brilliant at calving. Never seen him fail. Not once." The young man grits his teeth and pushes harder into the cow. "Mr. Broomfield," Uncle goes on, clearly enjoying himself, "strips down like a prize fighter he does, muscles like you wouldn't believe." For 2 absolutely agonizing hours, this poor young vet struggles, while Uncle keeps up this running commentary about the sheer, incomparable magnificence of the legendary Mr. Broomfield. Finally, when our young vet is about to throw in the towel, trembling with exhaustion and barely contained fury, something clicks. With one last desperate push, fueled almost entirely by rage at this point, he manages to loop a rope around the calf's jaw. A few minutes later, there it is, a tiny living calf, steaming on the straw. That young vet, absolutely covered in mud, and who knows what else, shivering in the freezing barn but feeling this incredible quiet sense of triumph, that was a man named James Herriot, and the story I just told you? It's one of hundreds from his life, all captured in a book that sold millions and millions of copies around the world. All Creatures, Great and Small. This isn't just some book about being a veterinarian. It's about life itself, in all its messy glory. It's about that moment when you step out of the safety of the classroom and realize that all those textbooks can't even begin to prepare you for the beautiful, chaotic, completely unpredictable reality of the actual world. The author, James Herriot, was actually the pen name of a real veterinarian named Alfred Wight, who practiced in the absolutely stunning and rugged Yorkshire Dales of England for 50 years. He didn't start writing these stories until he was 50 years old, never imagining for a second that his simple, honest accounts of a country vet's life would end up touching so many hearts around the world. So what's the secret? Why has this book remained a classic for decades? By the time we're done here today, you'll understand the profound yet beautifully simple lesson that James Herriot discovered in those freezing barns and on those windswept hillsides. It's about finding extraordinary joy in what seems like an ordinary life. It's about discovering that the greatest rewards often show up disguised as the hardest work. And it's about learning that a meaningful life isn't built on grand achievements, but on quiet dedication to the creatures, both great and small, that depend on you. This is a journey into a world that might seem distant at first, but its heart is something we're all searching for. So let's dive in. Our story kicks off in 1937, a pretty rough time in England. Imagine this. You're a young guy who's just spent 5 long, grueling years in college, finally achieving your dream of becoming a veterinary surgeon. You're bursting with knowledge, with enthusiasm, ready to make your mark on the world. But here's the problem. The world doesn't exactly seem interested. Agriculture is in a serious slump, and for every single job opening, There are nearly 80 applicants fighting for it. This was the harsh reality facing young James Herriot. Like so many of his friends, he was staring down a future of unemployment, watching his dreams basically crumble to dust. He'd almost given up hope entirely. Then one day, a letter arrives. It's like a lifeline, thrown from a place he's never even heard of. This little town called Darrowby, tucked away deep in the Yorkshire Dales. A veterinarian named Siegfried Farnon wants to interview him for an assistant position. It feels way too good to be true. With his last few pounds, Herriot buys a bus ticket and puts on his best suit, absolutely determined to make a solid impression. As the bus climbs higher and higher into the hills, he starts seeing a landscape completely unlike anything he's experienced before. The smoggy, grimy cities gradually give way to these rolling green hills, wide-open valleys, and literally miles and miles of ancient stone walls crisscrossing the countryside like some enormous gray web. It's breathtaking, but his mind keeps circling back to the horror stories he'd heard from other young vets, tales of nightmare bosses who worked their assistants practically into the ground for almost no pay. And what about this Siegfried Farnon character? With a name like that, Herriot's picturing maybe a stout, jolly German vet. But then again, he could just as easily be some cold, domineering tyrant. He honestly has no idea what to expect. When he finally arrives in Darrowby, the first thing that hits him is the silence. It's this small, gray little town, but it's completely surrounded by the immense, calming presence of these green hills. He can actually feel the grime and stress of city life beginning to fall away. He finds his destination, Skeldale House, this grand old Georgian building covered in messy, untidy ivy. A brass plate on the railing reads, S. Farnon, M.R.C.V.S. This is it. This is where his life as a vet will either actually begin or crash and burn before it even gets off the ground. He rings the bell, and the peaceful moment is absolutely shattered by this terrifying explosion of barking. A whole river of dogs, this huge greyhound, a cocker spaniel, a Scottie, a whippet, and this tiny terrier, basically hurls itself against the inside of the door, leaping and snarling like crazy. When the door finally gets opened by this large, rather grim-faced housekeeper named Mrs. Hall, the supposedly ravenous pack suddenly transforms into this crew of meek, tail-tucking little servants. But there's a problem. Mrs. Hall has absolutely no idea who he is. Mr. Farnon, she explains, never mentioned anything about an assistant coming for an interview. In fact, Mr. Farnon isn't even home. He's off visiting his mother. Left alone in this high-ceilinged sitting room, Herriot feels this wave of dread washing over him. Has he just been the victim of some cruel joke? The room itself is this weird mix of grandeur and complete chaos. Hunting prints hang on the walls. Books are piled absolutely everywhere, and sitting on the mantelpiece is this pewter pint pot literally overflowing with cash, and checks just lying there. The afternoon turns into this completely surreal parade of interruptions. The doorbell just keeps ringing. First up is this farmer named Bert Sharp, who arrives with a message for Farnon about his cow, delivered in a dialect so incredibly thick that Herriot can't make out a single word. She's nobbut going on 3 cylinders, the man says, leaving Herriot completely baffled and none the wiser. Next comes this deaf Irishman named Mulligan, whose dog is apparently Wometon bad. Herriot's attempts to conduct any kind of professional diagnosis by basically shouting into the man's ear turn into a complete disaster. Then the bell rings yet again. This time, it's this absolutely stunning, red-haired young woman named Diana Brompton. She announces in this loud, supremely confident voice that she's here for tea with Mr. Farnon. Herriot is completely stunned. He stammers that Mr. Farnon is out, and the woman just marches straight into the sitting room, treating him with this icy disdain. The silence stretching between them is thick with her obvious disappointment. She'd clearly shown up expecting to see the charming Mr. Farnon, and instead she's stuck with this sweaty, rumpled young guy in an old suit. After what feels like an absolute eternity, Diana storms out, and Herriot basically collapses into the overgrown garden, utterly defeated. Has he really spent his last few pounds to come all this way for absolutely nothing? He closes his eyes and drifts off, dreaming about that fat German vet he'd imagined, yelling at him for insulting his guest and eating his food. He's jolted awake by a voice. Hello? He opens his eyes. There's this tall, thin man leaning casually against the wall, a humorous smile playing on his long, strong-jawed face. He's wearing an old tweed jacket and flannel trousers. He holds out his hand. "Sorry you've had to wait," the man says, in quite possibly the most English voice Herriot has ever heard in his life. "I'm Siegfried Farnon." Siegfried Farnon is absolutely nothing like what Herriot imagined. He's chaotic, incredibly forgetful. He'd completely blanked on the interview, and yet there's this fierce, compelling energy about him. He takes Herriot on a whirlwind tour of the practice, which is housed in the long servants' quarters behind the main house. Their first stop is the dispensary, and Siegfried's eyes literally glitter with excitement as he shows it off. In those days, before modern antibiotics existed, the dispensary was basically the vet's entire arsenal. The walls are lined with these gleaming bottles filled with mysterious potions with wonderful names like Sweet Spirits of Nitre and Red Blister. Siegfried darts around, practically caressing the bottles, explaining their various uses with this infectious enthusiasm. He shows Herriot this neat trick, mixing iodine crystals with turpentine to create this dense cloud of purple smoke, which he claims is fantastic for treating wounds in horses' feet. "You must admit it looks wonderful," he says with this booming laugh. "Impresses even the toughest client." Herriot feels this unexpected sense of belonging among all these old medicines. He knows their secrets, their uses, their precise dosages. What he doesn't realize yet is that he's standing right at the end of an era. Soon enough, all these old remedies will be completely swept away by this rush of new discoveries. Siegfried is this absolute whirlwind of contradictions. He seems almost careless at times, yet he's genuinely passionate about veterinary medicine. He insists on doing things properly, on pushing the profession beyond the old castor oil and prussic acid doctrines that dominated for so long. And his driving? Well, that's an experience all by itself. The car is this battered old Hillman with completely threadbare tires and a cracked windscreen. The passenger seat isn't even properly fixed to the floor. When Herriot first sits in it, he flies straight over backwards, his feet flying up against the roof. Siegfried drives with this terrifying lack of attention, his eyes constantly on the countryside, the cattle in the fields, basically anywhere except the actual road ahead. He takes Herriot out on a few calls. First up, a lame horse. "Looks like pus in the foot to me," Herriot offers, trying his best to sound professional. "I'll bet you're absolutely right," Siegfried replies cheerfully. "Go on then, I'll watch your technique." Under his new boss's watchful eye, Herriot struggles to pare away the rock-hard hoof, with this massive horse leaning its full weight squarely on his back. Just as he's about to completely collapse from the strain, he feels this spurt of pus, He's actually done it. Siegfried slaps him heartily on the back. Well done, Herriot. It simply isn't funny when the horn is as hard as that. Later, sitting in this small pub in a quiet village, Siegfried finally makes the offer. Well, you can have this job if you want it. £4 a week and full board. £4 a week. At a time when experienced vets were literally offering to work for free just to get their foot in the door, it's an absolute fortune. Herriot tries desperately to hide his triumph. Thank you, he manages. I accept. He's in. His new life has actually begun. But the real test is still waiting around the corner. A few days later, Siegfried heads out, leaving Herriot in charge for the very first time. The phone rings. It's this man with a harsh, demanding voice. I am Mr. Soames, Lord Hulton's farm manager. I have a valuable hunting horse with colic. Do you know anything whatsoever about colic? Herriot feels his hackles immediately rise. This clearly isn't going to be an easy first solo case. When he arrives at the estate, he's met by this thick-set man, dressed in breeches and shiny leggings, who very deliberately turns his back on him. This is Mr. Soames. He looks Herriot up and down with obvious contempt, making it crystal clear he thinks this young, inexperienced vet is a complete waste of his valuable time. Inside the stable, the scene is absolutely horrific. This magnificent bay horse is staggering around in circles, absolutely drenched in sweat, its eyes wild with pure agony. Herriot's mouth goes completely dry. This is definitely no simple colic case. He just needs something to shift him, Soames snarls impatiently. He hasn't passed anything all day. Give him an injection of arecoline. Mr. Farnon always does exactly that. But Herriot knows deep down that if his diagnosis is correct, arecoline would be quite literally the worst possible thing he could do. After a quick but thorough examination, his worst fears are completely confirmed. Everything points to one thing. He says, his heart absolutely pounding. I'm convinced this horse has a torsion, a twisted bowel. Twisted bowel, my foot? Soames practically yells at him. Just do something useful. Herriot takes a deep breath, steadying himself. There's nothing anybody can do for a twisted bowel. The only kind thing is to put him out of his pain as quickly as possible. I strongly suggest you let me shoot him right now. Soames absolutely explodes with fury. Shoot him? Are you completely stark raving mad? Do you have any idea how much that horse is worth? He demands they wait for Siegfried to return. For just a moment, Herriot is genuinely tempted. It would be so incredibly easy to just give the horse a painkiller and walk away, leaving this terrible responsibility to someone else, someone more experienced. But then he looks directly at the horse, stumbling blindly in its complete agony. It raises its head and lets out this little whinny, this desperate, frantic sound of pure suffering. That sound is more than enough. Herriot strides purposefully to his car, gets his humane killer, and with one sharp crack, the horse's suffering is finally over. Soames is absolutely furious. I'm going to sue you, he hisses venomously. You'll be proven completely wrong at the post-mortem tomorrow, and you'll never work as a vet again anywhere. Herriot drives back to the surgery feeling genuinely sick to his stomach. Has he just destroyed his entire career before it even properly began? He waits up anxiously for Siegfried, who returns quite late, smelling pleasantly of gin after a nice evening with his mother. As Herriot nervously tells him the whole story, the phone suddenly rings. It's Soames. Herriot listens, his heart literally in his mouth, as Siegfried calmly handles the furious farm manager. Thank you for ringing, Mr. Soames, Siegfried says smoothly into the phone. It seems as though Mr. Herriot did the only possible thing. No, I cannot agree with you there. It would have been genuinely cruel to leave him suffering. I consider Mr. Herriot to be a highly capable veterinary surgeon. If I had been there myself, I have absolutely no doubt I'd have done exactly the same thing. This incredible wave of relief washes over Herriot. He's been backed up. He's been trusted when it mattered most. Siegfried hangs up the phone, pours them both this absolutely massive whiskey, and raises his glass with a grin. "Well," he says cheerfully, "you certainly got chucked in at the deep end tonight, my boy. Your very first case. And it just had to be Soames, too." The next morning, the post-mortem confirms it beyond any doubt. A classic torsion. Herriot had been absolutely right. Life at Skeldale House quickly settles into this chaotic but strangely comfortable rhythm. The household is completed by the arrival of Siegfried's younger brother, Tristan. He's supposedly a veterinary student helping out, but his real talent lies in doing as little actual work as possible, while somehow giving the convincing appearance of being busy. He's charming, incredibly quick-witted, and a constant source of both amusement and frustration for Siegfried. The dynamic between these three men becomes the absolute heart of the house. There's Siegfried, brilliant but prone to these explosive rages and moments of profound forgetfulness. There's Tristan, a complete master of avoiding work, who's perpetually being, quote, once and for all by his brother, only to casually reappear at breakfast the very next morning acting like absolutely nothing happened. And there's Herriot, caught squarely in the middle, trying his best to navigate their wildly unpredictable moods while learning the demanding ropes of his profession. He discovers pretty quickly that actual veterinary practice is nothing like what the textbooks described. It's lying on filthy floors in the middle of freezing nights. It's dealing with clients who are absolutely convinced they know better, like the farmer who stubbornly insisted the cure for his cow was pouring cold water in its ear, because that's what his dad always did and it worked just fine. It's this constant struggle with farmers who are incredibly reluctant to part with their brass, their hard-earned money, even after you've literally saved their animals' lives. And there's the sheer physical hardship of it all. The constantly chapped hands, the frozen feet that lose all feeling, the endless miles driven in a car with virtually no brakes. Herriot's little Austin is honestly a death trap on wheels. He has to stop it by crashing it violently into bottom gear, and one memorable day, on this particularly steep hill, it rolls away backwards, bouncing merrily down the slope, its doors flying comically open, shedding this trail of bottles and instruments, before completely demolishing the Darrowby Golf Club's clubhouse. Miraculously, the actual car is barely even scratched. But running through all this hardship, there's this incredible amount of humor and genuine warmth. There are unforgettable characters like Finn Calvert, this prosperous farmer who insists on dressing like a complete scarecrow, and greets a visiting brigadier with a cheerful, "Now then, Charlie, how is ta?" Finn becomes absolutely convinced that Herriot is some kind of genius who cures everything with nout but Epsom salts and cold water. And then there's the absolutely wonderful Mrs. Pumphrey and her pampered Pekingese, Tricki Woo. Mrs. Pumphrey is this wealthy widow who treats her dog exactly like a prince. Tricki has this entire wardrobe of custom tweed coats, suffers from these mysterious ailments like Flopbot and Cracker Dog, and apparently communicates his horse racing tips directly to his mistress. Herriot becomes Uncle Herriot, a position that comes with some genuinely lovely perks like smoked kippers, elegant hampers from Fortnum and Mason's, and endless glasses of truly excellent sherry. One day, Tricki becomes dangerously ill from being chronically overfed. Herriot knows the only real cure is getting the dog away from his indulgent mistress. He takes Tricki back to Skeldale House and puts him on a strict diet. For 2 solid days, absolutely no food, only water. Soon enough, Tricki joins the rough-and-tumble pack of household dogs, discovering all these joys of being bowled over, fighting enthusiastically for his share at mealtimes, and hunting rats in the old henhouse. He's completely transformed from this bloated little sausage into a hard-muscled, energetic animal. Meanwhile, a worried Mrs. Pumphrey starts sending these cases of sherry and brandy to, quote, build up poor Tricki's strength, leading to this very happy period of what they call ceremonial lunches at Skeldale House. Slowly but surely, Herriot begins to find his footing in this new world. He's no longer that terrified young man who showed up a year ago not knowing what to expect. He starts earning the farmers' genuine trust. They begin specifically asking for him by name when they call. One of his greatest tests comes with this farmer named Dick Rudd, a genuinely kind, incredibly hard-working man with this burning ambition to build up a fine dairy herd. He spends basically his entire life savings on one magnificent pedigree cow, this beautiful dark roan he lovingly names Strawberry. Just a month later, Strawberry develops this massive abscess in her throat. She can't eat properly, she can barely even breathe, and she's rapidly wasting away to practically a skeleton. Herriot knows he absolutely has to operate, but it's a procedure he's never actually done, never even seen performed in person. He has to go in from behind the jaw, through what's basically a minefield of major blood vessels. One tiny slip, and the cow will be dead within a minute. He's absolutely terrified, but he knows deep down it's the cow's only real chance. With Dick Rudd gently but firmly holding the animal's head, Herriot carefully makes the incision. His hand is trembling so violently he can barely even hold the scalpel steady. Instead, he pushes a pair of forceps deep into the wound, and with this tremendous surge of relief, he feels this gush of pus. He's actually done it. But the next day, the cow looks even worse than before. She genuinely looks like she's about to die any minute. Herriot is absolutely crushed by this overwhelming sense of failure. He feels like he's completely let this good, decent man down. But the day after that, when he returns fully expecting to find the cow dead, there's Strawberry, standing calmly at the hayrack, eating hungrily. She makes a complete and total recovery. It's this small miracle, a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph, that really solidifies his place in the Dales community. And it's actually through his work that he finds something else entirely. One day, he's called out to this farm called Heston Grange to treat a calf with a broken leg. The person who shows him the way to the barn is the farmer's daughter, this dark-haired girl with kind, steady eyes named Helen Alderson. As they walk together up the steep hillside to the barn where the injured calf is kept, he finds himself talking to her in a way he honestly hasn't talked to anyone in a really long time. He feels this instant connection, this wonderful sense of ease and rightness. His courtship of Helen becomes this absolute comedy of errors. There's the completely disastrous first date at the magnificent Reniston Hotel, where he shows up wearing this ill-fitting, rented dinner jacket, with his feet clad in a pair of absolutely ancient patent leather dancing slippers with these big silk bows, borrowed from Helen's father after his own shoes got completely soaked in a flood. The entire evening is basically a catalogue of mishaps and embarrassments. Then there's the memorable night at the Darrowby Plaza, the local cinema, where he gets loudly heckled by a disgruntled client, tormented by this drunken giant named Gobber Newhouse, who falls sound asleep on his shoulder, and finally witnesses Helen laughing absolutely uncontrollably at the sheer absurdity of the whole situation. "Next time," she says, her eyes just shining, "why don't we simply go for a walk instead?" And they do exactly that. They walk for miles and miles among the beautiful hills, and he knows without any doubt that this is the person he wants to spend his entire life with. One night, after helping with a particularly difficult calving involving her father's beloved pet Jersey cow, he finally finds the courage to ask for her hand in marriage. Mr. Alderson, who had always viewed him with a certain amount of suspicion, sits him down, pours them both this massive whiskey, and begins talking about his late wife, and how much Helen reminds him of her. He never actually gives a direct answer, but Herriot absolutely knows he has his blessing. The story comes full circle not in some grand cathedral or on a sunny tropical beach, but right there in the hills that have truly become his home. They decide to spend their honeymoon tuberculin testing this large herd of cattle at the very top of the dale. They stay at this cozy little pub called the Wheat Sheaf, and every single morning they drive out together into the high country. On his very first day of work as a married man, Herriot's new wife sits perched on a stone wall, her notebook balanced on her knee, ready to carefully write down all the numbers as he calls them out. He looks at her, smiling contentedly in the warm sunshine, and then at the vast green swelling glory of the dales stretching out around them. He remembers that first time driving nervously into Darrowby, absolutely full of fear and uncertainty about what lay ahead. He remembers the day Siegfried proudly put up a new brass plate on the railings of Skeldale House, right next to his own. It reads, J. Herriot, MRCVS. He's a full partner now. He has a real home. He has a wife who loves him. He has a life that matters. And in that perfect moment, surrounded by all the sights and smells of the countryside, doing the hard, often incredibly messy work he's completely come to love, he understands something profound. He's a genuinely privileged person. He has found his true place in the world. What an absolutely beautiful story, right? As you can probably tell, this is definitely one of those books that really stays with you long after you've finished it. It's not some story about changing the world in this big, dramatic, headline-making way. It's about finding your own small corner of the world and making it better. One animal, one person, one simple act of kindness at a time. When James Herriot first started his career, he, like so many of us when we're young and ambitious, had this grand vision in his head. He dreamed of running a modern, pristine animal hospital in a city somewhere, a world of pure science and predictable outcomes. But life, as it so often loves to do, had completely different plans for him. It sent him to a place that was the absolute opposite of his carefully constructed dream, the raw, unpredictable, and deeply traditional world of the Yorkshire Dales. And what he discovered there is really the central lesson of this entire book, that the richest, most fulfilling life is not the one we meticulously plan out, but the one we find when we genuinely open ourselves up to the unexpected twists and turns. He learned pretty quickly that all his impressive textbook knowledge was really only a starting point. The real, meaningful learning came from the hands-on, often incredibly messy experience of dealing with actual animals and real people with all their quirks. He learned genuine humility from cows that stubbornly refused to get up when they absolutely should have, and he learned about the quiet power of dedication from farmers like Dick Rudd, who poured their entire lives into caring for their stock. But I honestly think the most powerful lesson in All Creatures Great and Small is about the true nature of joy. Herriot's life was incredibly, almost impossibly hard. He worked 7 days a week, often straight through the night, in freezing, absolutely filthy conditions. He was regularly kicked, bitten, and covered in things you honestly don't even want to imagine. And yet, What shines through every single page of this book is this incredible, irrepressible sense of joy. It's the pure joy of seeing a newborn foal take its first shaky, wobbly steps. It's finding the humor in watching a pompous client get his well-deserved comeuppance. It's feeling that quiet satisfaction of a job well done, even when no one else notices or appreciates it. It's experiencing that deep, often unspoken connection he felt with the land and the people who worked it day in and day out. Herriot teaches us something really important. That joy isn't something you find by carefully avoiding hardship and difficulty. It's something you discover right in the middle of it, in the thick of things. So, how can we actually bring a little of that Yorkshire wisdom into our own modern lives? Here are a few simple ideas worth considering. First, genuinely embrace the mess. Our modern world is constantly pushing us towards perfection, towards clean, predictable, Instagram-worthy outcomes. Herriot's story reminds us that life is inherently messy, and honestly, that's exactly where the real growth and the absolute best stories are found. The next time something doesn't go according to your careful plan, instead of getting frustrated and stressed, try asking yourself, what's the story here? What's the hidden lesson? Where's the humor in this situation? Second, really find the value in service to others. Herriot's entire life was one of constant service to his community. He wasn't getting rich by any means, and he certainly wasn't getting famous, but he was genuinely needed. And in being needed, he found his true purpose. Think about who you can serve in your own life right now. It honestly doesn't have to be something grand or dramatic. It can be as simple as helping out a neighbor, volunteering for a cause you genuinely care about, or just being truly there for a friend who needs you. Finding where you're actually needed is one of the fastest, most direct paths to a meaningful life. And finally, learn to really stand and stare, as the poet said. In one of the most beautiful passages in the entire book, Herriot pulls his car over on a high moor and just looks out over this vast, stunning landscape. He reflects quietly on his life, his work, his place in the world. We live in this culture of constant motion, of always rushing frantically to the next thing on our list. But Herriot's story is a powerful reminder to actually build moments of quiet reflection into our busy days. To get out into nature when you can, to switch off all the noise, and to just be fully present. It's often in those quiet moments that we find the clarity we've been searching for all along. We've journeyed together through the hills and valleys of James Herriot's world today, and we've touched on some of the most memorable moments and lessons from all creatures great and small. But here's the thing. A summary is really like looking at a photograph of a beautiful landscape. The real magic actually happens when you walk through it yourself, when you experience it firsthand. The true heart of this book lies in all the small details, the quiet observations, and the rich, humorous, and deeply human way Herriot tells his stories. This summary is really designed to give you a genuine taste, to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take for yourself. If anything we've talked about today has warmed your heart even a little bit or sparked something in you, I truly, genuinely hope you'll pick up a copy and experience it fully. Reading it isn't just learning facts. It's a real experience, one that can honestly change the way you see the world and your own place within it. The link to the book is right there in the description below. Also, if this story has meant something to you today, I'd be so grateful if you would like this podcast and subscribe to our channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another potentially life-changing book. Let's keep exploring these incredible stories and growing together.